Welcome to Growing Your Wealth with Brian Evans and Jeff Shade, the show that simplifies the complexities of investments, taxes, retirement, and more, so you can discover how to better sustain yourself and your wealth for years to come. Brian Evans has been a CPA for more than 30 years, as well as a financial advisor, which brings a unique perspective to investment and retirement planning. Growing Your Wealth is brought to you by Madrona Financial and CPAs, home of the Madrona Analysis. Want a retirement plan designed to last 30-plus years? Go to madronafinancial.com and click Get Started today to see what the Madrona Analysis can do for you. And now, here are your hosts, Brian Evans and Jeff Shade.
Thank you so much. Welcome to Growing Your Wealth with Brian Evans, the show that gives you the straight talk and honest answers you need to help you sustain yourself and your wealth for 30-plus years. On today's show, we're going to be discussing the new reality for landlords and also money advice for women in terms of growing her wealth. I'm Jeff Shade, and as always, I'm just here to ask the questions with the words of wisdom and solid advice. They come from Brian Evans, President and CEO of Madrona Financial and CPAs. Hey, Brian, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Jeff.
Always glad to hear that, Brian. Hope our listeners are having a great November weekend. We appreciate you joining us here for Growing Your Wealth. Well, Brian's a little bit different here. I'm excited about today's show because we have a special guest in studio. It's Danielle Meister, the host of the podcast, Growing Her Wealth.
Yeah, I'm excited to have Danielle on the show today. She's done a couple of shows, if you've been listening to our radio program over the last few months, and wanted to get her on the show with me and talk about some things here. And the Growing Her Wealth, this is not just for women. So guys, if you're listening, maybe you have a wife, maybe you have a mom, maybe you have a sister, somebody in your life that has different challenges and different objectives than you do. And so this is a great show for you. Obviously, ladies, this would be a really important topic for you to pay attention to too. But I know when I'm talking about some of this stuff with my wife, she wants to know stuff that it's going to affect her someday. You know, it's okay, I talk about the stuff that I find interesting, but she'd really rather know what's going to happen with her because she has different objectives and maybe different life expectancy or whatever it is. And so we want to cover all that. So even though we're going to be talking about topics important for women in finance, guys, if you're listening, definitely pay attention because some of this could affect you. So Danielle, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. And so one of the things I will just jump in with retirement planning for women and longevity planning. One of the things that probably the most common topic I talk about with clients, you know, as far as what their priority is, you know, they all want to grow their investments. They all want certain things, but it's cash flow. Danielle, can you talk about cash flow, especially cash flow as it relates to the women investors?
Yeah, absolutely. And whether you're in a relationship or single, just like you were mentioning, we know that women tend to live longer. This isn't a secret anymore. And, you know, there's a recent article I read that says women a lot of times are living into their hundreds, and it's going to become more common as the years go by. So we have to plan for a longer retirement time horizon. So there's a couple of cornerstones, one of the big ones being Social Security. In my podcast, it's called The Truth About Social Security. It's a women's guide for planning ahead. You can really start to cut through some of the scary headlines. Will it be here? Will it not be here? Will it decrease? Is it going to get taxed heavier? And what we can do is start just looking at really smart timing strategies, things like spousal benefits. And we really need to know about when do we claim? Do we have a divorce situation where we can claim on an ex's record? Are you a widow? There's so many different ways that we need to make sure we're empowered by the strategies and the decisions that lie ahead. And honestly, it's not just Social Security. It's things like RMD planning, so your required minimum distribution. How can we do things like plan for maximizing and optimizing tax brackets and withdrawal from IRA accounts when you're in a lower bracket today than potentially getting into the widow's tax bracket, a worse tax bracket to be taking money out of an IRA account? How do we plan for this? Do we use Roth conversion strategies today? There's so many ways that we can start optimizing for cash flow today to plan for tomorrow and tomorrow's longevity.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've noticed that a lot of women that I talk to, they're often investing very conservatively because they're worried about outliving their money. They're worried about living to be 90 or 100. I mean, financial planning is tougher the more years we have to plan for, especially if a lot of those years are going to be without our husband. Not only do women live longer, very often they marry somebody that's older than them. And so they might even have more years. I have a lot more widow clients than widower clients. And so that's just the reality of things. And so one of the things that we really focus on is alternative investment strategies, different kinds of investments that can create multiple income streams. I find one of the best ways to reduce the stress for an investor, male or female, is to have multiple income streams. Can you speak to that a little bit, Danielle?
Yeah, being too conservative can be so devastating to a plan. You miss out on compounding interest for 10, 15, even up to 30 years. So being conservative is not the solution. It can actually be so detrimental. Instead, what you do is come up with a plan, have multiple income streams like you mentioned, and be really flexible about that planning. So you need to include things like investments for growth. And this can be real estate. It can be the public markets, just like the stock markets, and looking for ways to grow your money, but also then you can draw down from that to have a withdrawal strategy, and even annuities for guaranteed income. There's a lot of different ways that you can create different income levers, private credit, real estate, the list goes on. The more income levers you have, the less you're dependent on just one thing to survive through a potential crisis like a lost decade or a stock market crash, things like that.
And the one thing I'd point out on that is a lot of those techniques that you talked about, whether they include structured notes, buffered ETFs, credit funds, private real estate investment trusts, etc., they are not available to most investors. So if you and your spouse are investing the money on a do-it-yourself kind of thing, you don't even have access to this stuff. And most investment advisors do not offer everything that you just mentioned. And so it's critical that you have access to an investment advisor like Danielle here who has access to all these different areas.
Yeah, you know what? That made me think of something else, because if you're really good on the tax planning side and you understand that it typically is more advantageous to own real estate inside of a non-qualified account, you're going to place that asset in the right place. And same with an annuity. If you have the option to own that annuity with IRA money and you can get really tax-wise with some of these investments, even better for those income streams.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the annuity and how that can help with the RMDs. People are always worried about RMDs, and they might have a guaranteed lifetime cash flow annuity that more than covers all of their RMD requirements right there. And they're like, really? That took care of that? And this guaranteed for life, no matter how, if I live to be 100 years old, so that can be a component too. So it's part of the joy of doing what we do is to see these plans come together. To me, they're like a jigsaw puzzle, and I get to put together, or it's kind of like a movie, and you get to solve for things, and you see these clues and put things together. Do you kind of get that same kind of vibe?
Yeah, and it's even counterintuitive sometimes. People are like, wait, why would I take income now from my IRA account? But you go, no, this makes sense, because it's not about saving in taxes just today. It's about saving in taxes for the rest of your life. So if we can strategically take income sooner to make income lower because we're optimizing taxes later, sometimes it's counterintuitive to what you'd maybe think, or maybe what your Google search would tell you, or maybe a ChatGPT search. It's a lot of fun. It's, just like a jigsaw puzzle, and it's awesome.
Well, I'll pause right there. Jeff, can you take it from here?
Absolutely, Brian. You're hearing the program today, and maybe you've got a portfolio that consists of just stocks and bonds. You're really looking for something else. If you're looking for alternative investments, tax mitigation, if you're looking for estate planning, our Madrona analysis can help you with that. But beyond that, if you're married and you and your spouse are maybe not on the same page as far as financials go and your financial plan, again, this Madrona analysis can help you out. To get yours, call 833-673-7373. There's no cost, no obligation to this. 833-673-7373. The phone lines are open right now for you to do just that. And again, it is a casual conversation. 833-673-7373. Make that call right now. Brian, let's continue our conversation with Danielle Meister.
Thanks, Jeff. Now, Danielle, I'd like to address a tough life transition. Widowhood or aging on your own. A statistic I'm aware of is that 80% of all marital transfers are going to go to the woman, meaning that most of the time, as I mentioned, I have a lot more widow clients than widower clients. And so with that just being a statistic, can you comment on what unique challenges widows will be facing?
Yeah, it's a really tricky time because you're both in this really heightened emotional state, and you've got emotions running, and there's a lot of logistics involved as well. So you're grieving at the same time as you're all of a sudden managing accounts, bills, you're retitling assets, you might have to be funding credit shelter trusts, all these things that you've never done before potentially. If you haven't been managing these things in the past, you're put in the driver's seat at a time when you're potentially compromised. And so it's so common. It's 8 in 10 women are likely, like you said, to outlive their spouses. And if you're not engaged early and you're not really involved in the long-term financial decisions while you're married, it's so overwhelming for women later. And there's a statistic, it's up to 60% of women say they wish they had been involved sooner. I've got a really quick story here. I'm working with a woman right now, and her husband just passed away. And she was very much involved. They run stores together, and they've got all of these stores that they've managed together for many years. But after his passing, there were accounts in different places and accounts she didn't even know about, CDs at different banks that she'd never heard of. She's looking for account passwords. And it wasn't any malicious intent because they were a lovely couple. But now she's scrambling to try to uncover these hidden assets and potentially passwords that are locked away. And so sharing these things and being involved sooner prevents all of that stress and all of that worry that comes with not knowing later.
Yeah, and I would also, you mentioned dealing with trust. You probably don't have a lot of experience. Well, likely you have no experience dealing with credit, shelter, trust provisions because you're only going to do that once in your lifetime. And so whether you're the guy or the gal in this, it's going to be incredibly difficult. One area that you made me think about is I've had this situation where the husband passes away prematurely and his wife basically inherits their real estate empire. Problem is, she doesn't know where these properties are, who the tenants are, where the leases are, what maintenance has been done, what needs to be done, where the rent's going, where it's coming from, passwords. I could go on here. Do you have some advice for people on that?
I actually did a podcast on this not too long ago on growing her wealth, and there is a transition strategy for women who do not want to inherit their husband's landlord career. And you don't have to wait until a premature passing. Maybe the wife is running she's the landlord and the husband doesn't want to inherit the properties. As you're aging, if one spouse is primarily in charge and the other one is not, there should definitely be some planning involved. And one of the most powerful strategies from a planning standpoint is the 1031 exchange into DSTs that you talk about all the time. But this really can be a consideration, not just for, a retirement strategy for the landlord, but also transition planning and a spouse that doesn't want to take over tenants' toilets and trash.
Yeah, in fact, on the second half of today's show, I'm going to be talking about that exact example. So, ladies, if your husband's the landlord, or guys, if your wife is, whichever way, you want to listen to the second half of the show to find out some more details about landlord-tenant rules and Delaware statutory trust and how they can help you with your long-term retirement planning. Well, Danielle, I'd like to switch to another topic. This is really fun. I just love talking about these kinds of things with you. Health and longevity. As we age, health and wealth are intertwined, and many listeners may be caring for aging parents or ailing spouses. We're in the sandwich generation. A lot of us baby boomers are and so forth. So could you speak to that?
Caregiving is such a fundamental role that comes with being a woman, and it's part of many women's lives. And I don't want to say, again, it's not universal to women because my dad was a caregiver for my grandmother all the way up until she passed away about a year ago at age 96. And there's so much that goes into caregiving, whether it's a daily drive or a parent moving in, taking time off work, cutting back from work. And so there's little opportunities when maybe you least expect. And again, I've got a Kiplinger article on this that goes into when you're involved in these caregiving roles, and it could be parenthood, it could be caring for an aging spouse or an aging parent, perhaps there's a down income year, and we're not thinking about, this is an opportunity for me to do a Roth conversion strategy. There's a lot of tax planning opportunities in these down income years, and realistically, 85% of couples are going to need some sort of long-term care in their lifetime. And since women are going to outlive most men, they're shouldering a lot of these care responsibilities, but not aware of tax planning and investment choices and just all of these strategies that are at their disposal because they've got these, I don't want to call them blinders on, but they're so focused in the moment and they're prioritizing the care needs.
Yeah, one of the things I think about there is I don't know how financial planners or do-it-yourself investors are able to really navigate this without a very comprehensive and detailed financial plan being run. Danielle, tied in with caregiving, let's talk a little bit about gifting because that kind of goes hand in hand with the nature of women.
Yeah, I think women have a real giving heart, and sometimes it turns into a bleeding heart, so we do need to be careful here. But when we're looking at strategic gifting, And most of the time, people are writing a check or giving cash. Maybe they're at church and they're just giving cash. We're not thinking about ways that we can be more strategic. We're just thinking, how can we give to a member of the community or a specific organization? And along with caregiving, gifting, I think there's some real opportunities that are hidden behind the scenes. And when you pull back the curtain and you're able to identify things like qualified charitable distributions, where your gifting can actually have 30% more value if you're not paying taxes on it. And when you think, wait, my charitable organization could have a gift that's up to, 20, 30 plus percent more, that has real power to it. And there's all sorts of other ways that women are looking to gift, and that's to children and things like 529 accounts, UTMAs and UGMAs, which are just considered custodial accounts. There's a lot of ways that we can get tax efficient in the way in which we're gifting to others and giving to others.
And I think it's so critical to do a financial plan to project for all this stuff. Another thing about people as they age, we often limit our spending, our vacations, our life, the things we want to do because we're worried about running out of money. It seems like everybody I meet is like, well, I got to work till I'm really old. I got to not spend any money. I got to save until the day they die. And they never really do any self-care. They don't take care of what they want, what they need. They don't do the things that they could have been doing because they don't have the knowledge. Do you find that, Danielle?
Yeah, I think the psychology of wealth and then also your own personal well-being, investing in your health, your well-being, reading books about mindfulness, the psychology of wealth, and getting really smart and savvy on all of these things, it's going to add to your happiness, your joy, being able to experience the joy of wealth, what wealth can bring. Wealth isn't just about money. It's not just the dollars and cents. And so, I highly recommend, if you have not read our firm's Dr. Himmer, his book, Your Encore Years, take that first step and read his book, because it's tip of the iceberg in this mindfulness and wealth and longevity, and every little step that you take is going to be, is it another month or another year on your life or another trip that you could have taken with the grandkids. All in all, time is your most precious commodity. Don't waste it.
Great conversation, Brian and Danielle Meister. Once again, I want to remind our listeners, remember, your financial future can start with one small but very easy step, and that's requesting your Madrona analysis at 833-673-7373. If you've got a portfolio that's just stocks and bonds, you want more than that, again, this Madrona analysis can uncover some options for you. 833-673-7373. You can also get expert advice tailored just for the women in your life. Again, it's not going to cost you a dime. There is no cost and there is no obligation. When you do call that number, mention the keyword podcast, and we'll set you up with this appointment with a Madrona advisor. Again, it is a casual conversation, not going to cost you a dime. 833-673-7373, and the phone lines are open live right now.
I agree, Danielle. Dr. Himmer's book, Your Encore Years, is a great place to start when you're thinking about really what's important in life and really trying to get a change in your mindset. And that's so important in our conversations with people. I don't spend most of my annual meetings talking about the internal rate of return of every investment or anything like that. Generally, that stuff takes care of itself, but it's really about people and what their life wants to look like, and then planning ahead for some of the what-if scenarios. The what-if scenarios we can put into financial plans. What if this happens? What if that happens? We do that with our tax planning. What if we do this conversion? What if we don't? What makes the most sense? It makes me think also our other book, 7 Steps to a Successful Retirement. Of the 7 steps, I can identify the most important step, and the most important step is the lifestyle plan. And I was asked in a recent seminar, because the other stuff made sense, a tax plan, a healthcare plan, a gifting plan, legacy plan. We know what those are, but he was like, what the heck is a lifestyle plan? I said, well, that is the most important thing, because that, to me, is where you look at your ideal life 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. What does your day look like? Where are you at? Who are you with? How are you spending your time? What are you doing? That, to me, is the most important thing. And once you can visualize what that is, reverse engineer that and make that happen. So that's what I would say about the lifestyle plan. And that's why what we're talking about is so important, because a lot of us don't take that time to do that, men and women. But I think it's so important to do. So in that vein, I'd like to maybe talk about how do we stay organized and plan for that legacy, that great life that we have the opportunity to live.
Yeah, I think as a firm, you say this all the time, we pride ourselves on being able to coordinate across all the different areas of financial planning. So it's like you said, it's not just about the investments, it's the lifestyle plan, it's taxes, advanced gifting, and healthcare. And one of those areas being making sure that one of the greatest gifts that you give yourself and your loved ones is getting your affairs in order. And we need to make sure that we've got the legal documents up to date, things like wills, trusts, powers of attorney, healthcare directives. You guys, what we see is that so often that widows are discovering surprises, and even children are discovering surprises of updated wills. Maybe there's hidden debts or hidden accounts. We need to avoid that, and it's really easy to do. It's not procrastinating. It's not pushing that aside to do next week or next year. Get your documents updated. Update them regularly. Don't let this be a scary conversation, and let this be a conversation that you can invite others into, loved ones, children, spouses, etc.
Yeah, one of the things that people don't like to talk about is dying. And we do estate planning. What's that about? Somebody's passed away. But let's look at the positive side. Positive side of dying. Okay, Brian, let's see what you got for me here. The positive side to me is if you don't do some planning, you may be volunteering hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to taxing authorities. And I ask people all the time, if that just that is what's going to happen unless you do this planning. Would you rather leave hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to your kids, to your spouse, or to your charities? Or would you like to leave it to the state you're in, state of Washington, and the federal government? You get to choose for a big chunk of that. And I find that most people I talk to, once they put it in that, well, if you're going to put it that way, Brian, I would feel good about getting my affairs in order, doing my proper planning, taking care of my spouse. If I pass away first, that they can think of me lovingly and not, you left me with what? And we had to pay what taxes? And this money's not going to go to our kids and grandkids because you didn't do what? And you were in charge and now you're not around. You see where I'm going with this. Think about the legacy you can leave, because we all want to leave a positive legacy, and we don't want to waste our money on bad planning. So that's what we're here for. And isn't that, Danielle, something that you take great pride in when you talk to your clients?
Yeah, I mean, great pride. And I look at the state of Washington versus where I live in the state of Utah, and I think, oh my gosh, there is such a planning opportunity because of some of the new rules that came in over this past summer. And the fact that $3 million that you're going to have to start paying significantly more estate taxes, and then at $9 million up to 30% of your
35.
35 can be
on
lost.
top of the federal. If you have even more, it can be the marginal tax bracket for those people in the state of Washington that pass away here at higher net worth levels is 61%. 39% goes to your kids and your spouse or to your kids basically, and 61 if you're not planning ahead.
And we were talking about this while we were driving, and it's amazing to me that there's such an opportunity to plan around this, and it could be as easy as sitting down for one meeting. You sit down, you get your affairs in order, and all of a sudden you saved up to maybe 60% in estate taxes on, it could be millions of dollars.
It's crazy, the opportunities that are out there. And we're going to talk in the second half of the show again today on one of those techniques that can save a lot of money someday with a step up in basis and just improve, and kind of be lockstep of what we're talking about here, getting your affairs in order ahead of time. That doesn't mean getting your affairs in order to die. A lot of times it means getting your affairs in order to live the lifestyle you want to live, to not be subject to worrying about landlord-tenant rules, all that kind of stuff during your later years, but being able to have the freedom. You mentioned that our limited resource is time. It's generally not money for a lot of people that I talk to. They think it is until we do a plan, then we realize, well, it's not really that. It's kind of time, isn't it? I'm like, yes. And it's not just time. It's about planning, living the life you want to live. There's time, and there's time spent doing what you want to do. Well, Danielle, we've already run out of time. This is so much fun. I'm going to have you back soon, but really, thank you. Appreciate you being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, Brian. Thank you, Danielle. Once again, for our listeners, You're hearing the program today. You and your spouse or the woman in your life are not on the same page financially. Well, we can correct that for you by calling 833-673-7373. That's the number that you will call right now and request your Madrona analysis. No cost, no obligation, no judgment. 833-673-7373. As I said, the phone lines are open right now. We'll keep them open for you for about the next hour and a half or so that you can request your Madrona analysis. No cost, no obligation. 833-673-7373. Brian, let's take a break. When we come back here on Growing Your Wealth, we're going to be talking about the new landlord-tenant rules and more when Growing Your Wealth continues after this.
Tired of getting only half the story? That's why it's so important to get your financial information from a CPA and a financial advisor like Brian Evans. Now, let's get back to more of the most comprehensive financial information around. Growing Your Wealth with Brian Evans and Jeff Shade.
Welcome back to Growing Your Wealth. I'm Jeff Shade alongside Brian Evans, President and CEO of Madrona Financial and CPAs. And in just a moment, we're going to be talking about changes to landlord-tenant laws. But before we do that, I want to invite in Dr. Richard Himmer, one of the partners here at Madrona Financial, to talk about the non-financial side of retirement. Richard?
Thanks, Jeff. The tension between money and wealth is retirement's great paradox. Money safeguards our lives. Wealth breathes life into what's been safeguarded. The challenge is learning how to keep them in harmony. Imagine these two dimensions as a map with 4 quadrants. On one axis lies money, your financial capability, planning, and security. On the other lies wealth, your emotional health, relationships, and a sense of purpose. At the top right, where both thrive, is the zone of flourishing, the Goldilocks zone, if you will, stability mixed with joy. At the bottom left, where both are weak, lies scarcity, insecurity, and anxiety dominating daily life. But the real complexity happens in the other 2 quadrants. Those who are rich but lonely, financially strong but emotionally starved. The other contains those who are loved but insecure, socially vibrant but financially fragile. The healthier retirement lives near that upper right corner, where freedom and connection intersect. Achieving isn't about working harder, it's about awareness. You might start by asking 2 simple questions. How prepared am I financially for retirement? And how prepared am I emotionally for retirement? The answers reveal more than numbers. They expose balance or imbalance between your outer life and your inner world. If your financial preparation is strong, but your emotional readiness feels shaky, it may be time to invest. Not in markets, but in community, creativity, purpose, identity, yourself and others. And if your emotional landscape is rich, but your finances feel uncertain, perhaps strengthening your financial habits will bring greater peace to the life you've built. Money, in the end, is a tool. Wealth is the experience that gives that tool meaning. Without money, opportunities shrink. Without wealth, even abundance feels empty. The secret of a fulfilling retirement is finding the rhythm where both support rather than compete with each other. So today, take a quiet inventory. Your portfolio shows what you own. Your calendar and your heart show what you treasure. The future belongs to those who can blend the two, turning their financial freedom into time well spent, relationships well tended, and a life that feels whole. To learn more about balancing your riches with your wealth, pick up my new book, Your Encore Years, The Psychology of Retirement, and learn what it means to be whole.
Thanks, Richard. And for listeners, you can subscribe to Richard's podcast by going to hownottoretire.com. Brian, Washington State recently rolled out some of the strictest landlord-tenant rules in the country. How do you expect that to affect the real estate market?
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here because there's some things that have been changed and some things that are going to change. And if you're a landlord, they're not going to change in your favor. So Washington State has some new landlord-tenant rules that they've come out with. Seattle has theirs. Tacoma has theirs. They're different. Now, Tacomas are the most onerous, and so we're going to focus on those because I'm pretty sure people paying attention to elections know that Seattle just elected a self-proclaimed socialist as their mayor. Now, I think it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out that if Tacoma has very landlord-tenant rules that are very much skewed towards the tenant and against the landlord, that Seattle, at a minimum, will adopt those rules and will likely, this is my opinion, will likely want to go well beyond that. Because in order to provide affordable housing without having the resources to do that yourself, you've got to get your resources from somebody else. The resource being housing means that it's resources owned by the landlords. And so if landlords have the resources you need to promote the things you want to do as a socialist mayor, you're going to have to do some takeaways from landlords. That's just the nature of the beast. And so we've seen what the Tacoma rules are doing. Again, I fully expect that Seattle is going to adopt that. And why this is important, the landlords that I know are not out there to mess with tenants and make their life tough. They want good tenants that will take care of their properties and pay their rent on time. That's kind of it. They want to keep up with enough rental income to cover increases in insurance costs, property taxes, repair expenses. Subcontractors are more expensive now. All these costs are going up. They want to be able to have a reasonable rent and cover those expenses. So that's generally what I see. But, now it's kind of like, well, they're kind of being villainized, especially in Tacoma. Again, we'll talk about that. And the bottom line for this is the reason we're talking about this is not to just feel bad if you're a landlord. There's a couple of things. One is to alert landlords as to the impending drop in the valuation of your rentals. The impending drop is when cap rates increase, where new investors need to have a higher return in order to offset the risk that they're taking by being a landlord in Seattle or in Tacoma, which can drop your valuations. So if you know the valuations are probably going to drop because of changes in regulation, I want to alert you to that. The second part of this discussion is going to be, what's the solution? We're going to offer some solutions to that. We're going to talk a little bit about the Delaware Statutory Trust using a 1031 exchange, so that you can convert your Seattle, Tacoma, Washington real estate to other kinds of real estate that are not subject to these onerous new landlord-tenant rules.
Brian, a statewide rent cap now limits revenue growth at 7% plus inflation capped at 10%. What does that mean for long-term investors?
Yeah, that doesn't mean a whole lot, honestly. However, as we know, anytime the state of Washington passes something like a new capital gains tax, it doesn't take them long for them to go, well, that's not enough. We need to jack that up way more. And in this case, it's another example, I believe, of, okay, we'll get it on there and people will see 10%. Of course you shouldn't raise rents 10%. That seems reasonable. Well, in a year or two, what about maybe that's 5%? Maybe it's 3%. Or the dreaded 0%. So when you have a rent freeze, we've seen this in other big cities, it just destroys the fabric of the supply-demand curve, the landlord-tenant, everything. It stops supply. It creates housing shortages, because nobody wants to be a landlord. If you freeze it, it freezes and it even drops your valuations substantially, because valuations of real estate are tied to rents. If rents can't ever go up, guess what? Neither can the value of your property. So if you're stuck there and you're regulatorily stuck and you can't ever see an increase in your property, why are you ever going to buy a rental in Seattle? Oh, and guess what? They're not freezing. They freeze the rent, but you're going to freeze my property tax increase? No. My regulatory increases? No. How about my repair expense? Are you going to freeze what the plumber charges me? No. Are you going to freeze my insurance costs when the insurance company? No. So I can raise my rent to cover this? No. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. I want to sell this. And investors are going to go, no. And so property values have to fall in this. And that's why it's so important to talk about this. It's not the 10%. It's the fact that it's going to change. And as our political landscape changes, what we'll probably see, again, this is my estimation of what is to come, in Seattle, we're going to see some dramatic rent control at some point. And that is going to cause potentially a big drop in real estate valuations for landlords. So the analogy I was thinking about on the way in today, if you're standing on the train track and you see a train and you hear it and you feel it in your feet, the rumble, and you hear the horn go off and that big bright light's coming at you, Okay, I'm standing there next to the track. I'm going to put my hand out. I'm going to help you, give you an off-ramp so that train doesn't hit you. Or you can see it coming and just wait for it to hit you. Okay, I don't think most people want to sit there and wait for it to hit them. So I'm going to give you the off-ramp here. I'm going to offer my hand here. I'm going to give you some solutions here. But that train's a-coming, and I think we all see it, we hear it, we feel it, we know it's coming. So that's why I think this segment of the show is really important for those landlords listening right now.
And Brian, the phrase I keep hearing is that you can't manage your rentals like it's 2015. The rules today really make rentals far riskier and far less flexible. And one of the changes that I'm hearing about is long notice periods, 90 days statewide, 180 days in Seattle. Does that change the risk profile for landlords?
Absolutely. So it used to be 30 or 60-day notices. Let's just go right to the Tacoma rules, because that's what's going to be, again, that's probably where Seattle's going to start. They'll probably go beyond that. But currently, you need 3 notices. You need to give it a notice between months 6 and 7, 180 to 210 days. Now, when I read that as a CPA, they're not talking about 179 days. They're not talking about 211 days. It's 180 to 210. You have to nail it in that 30-day window. Oh, you have to use a city-prescribed form to give that notice. Then you need a second notice at 120 days prior. Now, they say at 120. I don't know if it's 121 or 119 makes it invalid. The way I'm reading it is at 120. A final reminder notice 90 days out. So we have to be very prescriptive for any rent increase. And failing to follow any of these steps can invalidate the rent increase. And so, we've had a big change from 30 or 60-day notices with city-prescribed forms and very prescriptive time periods. So you have to be very organized if you ever want to raise rents. And it has to start at least 6 months before the rent increase is in effect.
Brian, I want to take just a quick moment here to remind our listeners that if you are a landlord or you're thinking of becoming a landlord, let's say that you are a landlord and you're worried about that these new regulations are going to pretty much prohibit you from continuing to be a landlord. You're looking for an exit strategy. Call us here at Madrona and ask for your Madrona analysis. No cost, no obligation. Certainly, it's not going to cost you a dime. 833-673-7373 is our telephone number. We've opened the phone lines for you right now live during the radio program so that you can make that call. If you want to get ahead of this landlord-tenant game before it gets even more out of control, make that call right now at 833-673-7373. As I said, there is no cost and there is no obligation. Brian, Seattle and Tacoma now require relocation payments for certain rent increases. How is that impacting investors?
Yeah, so the relocation fees in Seattle, there's some common sense to it. There's actually a measure. They have to be somewhat low income, household income below 80% of area median and so forth. But if you try and raise rent on these folks, then there may be a relocation payment of 3 months' rent. In Tacoma, what's interesting about that one is regardless of the tenant's income. So they could work at Microsoft, make $200,000 a year. You want to raise the rent 5% because your costs have gone way up and you haven't raised it in a couple of years, 5 to 10, whatever. Let's say the rent's $3,000 a month. The tenant, regardless of their income, can say, nope, you're going to give me $6,000 to $9,000 to relocate, and you have to do it. They're the arbiter. They get to decide whether it's too much of a rent increase. And so all you tried to do was kind of keep up with the expenses, and you got to write them a check for relocation regardless of income. So Tacoma doesn't even care about whether it's onerous or not for the tenant. They're just saying, yeah, too bad, so sad, Mr. Landlord. You're going to write that check. Again, Seattle at least has a measurement relative to your income, but Tacoma has no measurement. You can make any amount of money and still request and require a relocation fee from the landlord.
And Brian, evictions and non-renewals are now heavily regulated, especially during certain times of the year. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, now you have to have cause, which, for most people listening, okay, I guess that makes sense. You're a tenant. You don't want to just be evicted for no reason. But Seattle has particular bans. Again, we'll go with Tacoma because we're going there and probably beyond. But what's interesting about Tacoma's is, well, it's November right now, or November, December. It's cold. And so during cold months, November through April 1st, you can't evict anybody really for any reason. And so if they have school-age kids, well, now we're talking September through the middle of June that you can't do any evictions. So the only evictions can really happen, especially with school-age kids, in the summer. And that can be for non-payment. So you get somebody who moves in September and they've got a kid in school. Guess what? They decide not to pay you rent for the next 9 months. That's too bad. You can't evict them. It's cold, it's a school-age kid, whatever the case may be, that's too bad. That's on you, Mr. Landlord. I know you were living on that rent. That was your income. Some people have pensions, some people have rentals, and that was going to be your income for life. And, all right, you're just stuck with non-payment. You hope they're taking care of the place. And generally speaking, I've been a landlord. Generally speaking, people that aren't paying rent are also not taking care of your place. So you're sitting there waiting your 7, 8, 9 months for them to move out. You got to hire attorneys. You got to go through all this stuff. You're spending thousands and thousands of dollars you don't have because you don't have any money coming in. You're using your Social Security to get you there. You see where I'm going with this, Jeff. It can be mind-numbing. And then you go in, as I often did when I had a tenant move out, and it's like, wow, the last year's, even when I got rents, the last year's rents I got to put back into this just to fix it up to where it looked like when they moved in the first place. Why am I even bothering? And so this is a reality for a lot of people. Now, some people are fortunate. They have good tenants that take care of the place and pay their rent. But if you don't, then we're talking it can be devastating for a retired person that's put themselves in a position where they're kind of at the mercy of new regulations that are coming down the pike. And we've seen that trend coming, and it's already kind of there in Tacoma. So we feel like, gosh, landlords are they don't have an advocate, frankly, anymore at the state and local levels. And so I want to alert people to that.
Brian, we've talked about Seattle, Tacoma, King County. Do you know if these regulations are going to be in effect sometime soon in Snohomish County? Some of the other areas that people may be listening to us.
Well, that's exactly how it starts. It started at state level. Tacoma, again, went very aggressive. Seattle had theirs. We're seeing politics, Seattle's replacing a liberal mayor with a socialist mayor. So the premise of that is that people with money need to give it to the people that don't. I mean, that's just kind of how that stuff works. I mean, I'm not making anything up. I'm not being political here. That is what it is. And so if you're a landlord, you have the stuff that is needed to provide to people that don't own the real estate. And so the rules are not going to get better. And they spread. This stuff spreads. I mean, once one city sees something and the council eventually, maybe says, well, why don't we use what they're using and help people out? People want to help people get into places they can rent and afford. And so all of the rules are going to be tailored to the tenant. And so, again, alerting landlords that your valuations are going to be affected by this. And so we want to think about how we can get out. One of the interesting things I've noticed is fees and deposits. I mean, we don't think too much about it. But in Tacoma now, the maximum fee that you can charge for a late rent payment is $10.
Really?
10.
Wow.
With 2 lattes. And so I'm going, well, I can pay my $2,500 on time, or I get a $10 bill. Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And you can't evict me anyway? I mean, we're an incentive-based creature. Human beings are very incentive-based. If my incentive is not to pay my rent because I don't have to anyway, it's a $10 charge and good luck collecting that. What, are you going to hire an attorney? I didn't pay my rent during the cold months and moved out. You're going to hire an attorney. It's going to cost you 3 times as much for the attorney to collect the rent you thought you were going to get anyway. Oh, and then the $10, I'm not paying that either. It's like, really, is that going to stop anybody from not paying the rent? Of course not. $10. And, the deposits are lower. All this stuff just adds up more and more and more. I've been doing, seminars lately on that. And this guy was sitting there, are you trying to get my blood pressure up? Because my head's about ready to pop off my neck. So I'm sorry, but I'm just telling you what the rules are.
Well, because the risk-reward ratio is broken, I think that buyers are disappearing. And really, what do you think? That lowers property value across the board.
Oh, by default it does, because, again, it's a numbers thing for landlords. When they buy a property, they have cap rates, they know expenses, they project things out. They project out rent increases. Oh, I can't project those anymore maybe. Or they project out expenses. Oh, those are going up. And over time, they're going, wow, I'm going to be worse off in the future than I would be now. I am not going to give you what you thought that place was worth. And most landlords have a number in their head. They think it's worth X amount. And that amount is probably at least 15, 20% less then the reality is probably at least that much less now. It could be much, much worse. We could see dramatic decreases in valuations, especially if socialist policies get implemented in Seattle and beyond. And so just let's know what's coming. Again, I'm just telling you what's coming, throwing out some of the rules, and letting you kind of draw your own conclusions to that.
Brian, before we continue, once again, I want to remind our listeners that if you're frustrated with regulations, shrinking cash flow, declining property value, you're a landlord, this analysis, the Madrona analysis, can help you get a plan in place, and we're offering it at no cost and no obligation. Call 833-673-7373. You can do it right now during the show. Phone lines are open to request your Madrona analysis. It's just a casual conversation. When you do, mention the keyword podcast, and we'll set you up with an appointment with a Madrona advisor to discuss your options if you're an active landlord. Things are not getting better, they're only getting worse. So go ahead, make that call right now, 833-673-7373. As I said, the phone lines are open right now. This one call really could make all the difference. So, Brian, you've talked about the impending freight train coming for the landlords. Let's talk about some of the alternatives here. What can a landlord do if they feel trapped?
Yeah, my goal now is to bring down the blood pressure of the landlords that have been listening to me for the last 15 minutes. And so, boy, do I have a solution for you. So for many people, we've done a lot of this to help people, the landlord exit strategy, their retirement strategy. It is to do a Section 1031 exchange where you sell your investment real estate and you exchange it into other real estate, which defers the tax and eventually potentially eliminates all the capital gains, income tax, depreciation recapture with a step up in basis someday. Most people that have heard about 1031 exchanges or done them know that they sell one property and buy another. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, I don't really want to be a landlord anymore. It's done what it was supposed to do. My valuations have gone way up. I've got appreciation. I don't want to pay the tax when I sell this stuff, and I don't really want to be a landlord. And I sure don't want to sell a Tacoma property to buy a Seattle property or vice versa. That doesn't help anything. What else have you got, Brian? So for people who have listened to the show for years, or if you're brand new, what we have for that is the way that you can do that and not be a landlord is to do a 1031 exchange into something called a Delaware Statutory Trust. A Delaware Statutory Trust is just a fancy name for it's almost like a small private REIT, real estate investment trust. It's commercial real estate such as apartments, self-storage, student housing, triple net lease properties where you could sell your properties. So let me give you an example so you can put a picture on this. You have a fourplex, it's worth $2 million and you want to sell it. And so you got that $2 million and you 1031 exchange into passive real estate. And you put $500,000 into each of these four different asset categories I just mentioned. Let's say it is a big apartment complex, self-storage, student housing, and triple net leases. So you've got this diversified portfolio of newer properties in other states, professionally managed by real estate companies. What happens then? Well, the first thing is that you don't pay any income tax on the sale of your real estate. Wow, because you executed a proper 1031 exchange. Now, the month after you invest, you start getting your share, along with lots of other owners of these properties, your share of the monthly net cash flow. So you're getting rental income, which is great. You want to replace your rental income from the fourplex you just sold. What else do you get? Well, you get to participate in any appreciation. So if commercial real estate appreciates at a reasonable rate, you get that on top of your cash flow. And so it's a nice investment. Is it going to double in value every 7 years? No. These are kind of, I call them stay rich strategies instead of get rich. You already got rich potentially on owning your real estate. Now you want to stay rich and you don't want the headaches. A lot of the people that do this are baby boomers or older people because they want to retire from being a landlord. And it's not that they need more money or more growth of assets primarily. What they want is more cash flow and more time, because time is their limited asset as you get older. It's not necessarily your money. If you own rentals and you've been successful at that, that's not your limiting factor. Time and reduction of stress and so forth is what you're looking for. So This can be a really nice exit strategy for people. Again, you're going to get your rental income. You're going to get any appreciation on that. You're not going to pay the income tax. When you pass away or your spouse passes away in the state of Washington, you get a double step up in basis. So no one will ever pay income tax on the gains of your rental properties for all the years that you owned them. If you leave it to your kids, same thing can happen with step up in basis. So this allows that to happen. You're not going to be managing property in your last years. You might have dementia or something like that. You're not going to be leaving property management to your spouse that may not be interested in being a property manager. There's many potential benefits from the DSTs. Detriments are they're not as liquid. They're an illiquid asset for a period of time. Some people are still in the get-rich stage of life. Some people need the liquidity, right away, and so they would just pay the tax. But we can go over why you would not do them, why you would do them. But it's a great exit strategy for the people we've done these for. We've done about $200 million for clients to get them out of that. I can't recall anybody complaining ever about saying, I wish I'd never done that. I wish I was still fixing toilets and dealing with new regulations and tenants. Gosh, I miss the tenants. Gosh, I miss the move-outs and the repairs. I really miss all that. I just don't hear that, Jeff. It's just not something that I ever hear. And so once people do it, they're like, oh my gosh, it can be life-changing for people, for the right people. And again, we're going to evaluate that. So to me, it makes all the sense in the world. If you are a landlord, especially in Seattle, Tacoma, that kind of area, and, in your 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever you are, doesn't it make sense to educate yourself on what your options are? I'm doing classes on these and I'm educating people. These are your options. This is what you can do. I got my hand out. You're on that train track. Train's coming. I can walk you over to this nice area here and you can picture a retirement where you don't have the stresses of some of the things I was talking about earlier in this segment, and rid yourself of that and have the benefits that you want from owning your real estate and have it work for you in the way you want it to and not be stressed out dealing with all the stuff that I was talking about earlier.
Folks, if you want to explore strategies like the 1031 exchange, DSTs, or maybe even a 721 UPREIT, you want to learn how to reposition your rental property in today's regulatory environment, then call us here at Madrona Financial 833-673-7373 right now and request your Madrona analysis. No cost, no obligation. If you're frustrated with regulations, shrinking cash flow, declining property value, this analysis can help you get a plan in place. Once again, that phone line is open right now at 833-673-7373. Go ahead, make that call. It really could make all the difference. Brian, we've covered two major topics today: the new reality for landlords in Washington State, and of course our conversation with Danielle Meister here about growing her wealth. I want to take the opportunity to thank you for your time, but most importantly, I want to thank our fine listeners here in the greater Seattle area and Puget Sound area for joining us. So for Brian Evans, I'm Jeff Shade. Get out there, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again next week right here with another edition of Growing Your Wealth.
No statements made during the Growing Your Wealth show should constitute tax, legal, or accounting advice. You should consult your own legal or tax professional on your individual information. Brian Evans at Madrona Financial Services is licensed to offer investment advisory services through Madrona Financial Services, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Insurance products are offered through Madrona Insurance Services, LLC, a licensed insurance agency, and an affiliate of Madrona Financial Services. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Investors cannot invest directly into indexes. No investment strategy, including asset allocation and diversification, guarantees a profit or guarantees the avoidance of loss. Financial planning is an important tool that does not guarantee specific outcomes. DST investments are only available to accredited investors and offered solely through the issuer's offering documents. The DST sponsor determines whether to accept any individual subscription documents. Madrona Financial and CPAs is a registered trade name used singly and collectively for the affiliated entities. Madrona Financial Services, LLC, Madrona, and Bauer Evans, Inc., PC, Bauer Evans. Investment advisory services are provided through Madrona. CPA services are provided through Bauer Evans.